The day my wife Willow had a miscarriage, I not only failed to stay by her side but even faked my own death and disappeared. All because the child she carried was not mine. The real father was actually the villager who once saved her. On the surface, Willow hated the villager for taking advantage of her when she had lost her memory. Yet behind my back, she secretly kept him as her lover. She thought I noticed nothing, that she could have it both ways, making me willingly raise the child for her. But what she didn't know was that in my marriage, betrayal has no place. Everything she has done, I will make her pay back 1,000-fold. Chapter 1. When Willow lost her memory, she was picked up by the villager. The villager told Willow she was his wife, who had fallen off a cliff and forgotten everything. He tricked her into living as husband and wife with him in that remote mountain village for 5 months. 5 months later, Willow finally remembered her childhood sweetheart, me, the one who treasured her like the most precious jewel, was still waiting at home. With utter disgust, Willow threw a generous hush money payment at the villager and, without hesitation, returned home. Seeing me, haggard and skin and bones from the pain of her disappearance, broke her heart into pieces. That shameless liar. I never want to see him again for the rest of my life. To Willow, those 5 months were nothing but shame and a stain on her life. Anyone in City A who dared mention it would trigger her fury. Don't you dare bring up that disgusting man in front of me again. It makes me sick, Willow said, her face full of revulsion. I thought everything would finally return to normal, even though Willow was pregnant. But I loved Willow too much, so much that I couldn't bear for her to suffer even the slightest pain. None of this was her fault. She was just another victim of circumstance. I accepted the child. I will love this child, I said with trembling words. Willow, he is your child, and I will treat him as if he were my own. Yet I gradually noticed that Willow began to refuse to let me accompany her to medical checkups. At night, when we were supposed to do prenatal bonding together, her mind would often wander, lost in thoughts she never shared. I kept telling myself Willow was just too insecure, that women during pregnancy were especially sensitive, and that she must have her own reasons. Until that day, I was sitting in my usual cafe, basking in the sun, and idly checking the live feed of my home security cameras. On the screen, a tanned, ruggedly handsome man wrapped his arms around Willow's waist and stumbled into the room with her. The audio quality of the device was excellent. Willow's voice sounded as if she were speaking right beside me. I told you not to come looking for me. The baby inside you is mine. If you don't divorce that man George, I'll immediately marry another woman and become the father of her child instead. Enraged by his words, Willow's delicate fingers dug into the man's neck. Makoto, don't you dare dream of it. Alive. You belong to me. Dead. You're still mine. You are the father of the child in my belly, and yet you think you can find another woman. Who gave you that courage? Then promise me, divorce George. Willow hesitated for a moment, then spoke with despair. Fine. I'll agree to divorce him. I'll find a way to settle George properly. But remember this, you can never replace George. He is more important to me than my own life. The surveillance footage was so clear that I could even see the fleeting darkness and hatred flash across Makoto's eyes. Tears welled up in Makoto's eyes. Then he lunged forward and bit down hard on Willow's lips. The two of them shoved and tussled, rolling all the way into the bedroom. And Willow didn't push him away. So it turned out the love of my childhood sweetheart had already soured. That was the real reason Willow was so absent-minded all the time. I clenched my teeth as tears streamed down my face. Our families had been close for 3 generations. Willow and I were born on the same year, same month, same day. Even though we were the same age, she was always like a gentle older sister to me. I was born frail and sickly, though I was the boy. It was always Willow who looked after me like an older sister would. All my life, Willow was the one who packed my school bag. When I couldn't solve a problem, she stayed up until 3 in the morning to work it out for me. She remembered all my likes and dislikes. When I had my first wet dream, it was Willow who taught me about physiology and even washed the sheets for me. Whenever I was insecure and restless, I would hold Willow's hand and ask her why she treated me so well. Willow never grew impatient. She always answered with infinite patience and tenderness, repeating her love for me over and over. Even though I'm only 3 hours older than you, taking care of you is my mission in this world. My throat tightened. Trembling, I picked up my phone and made a call. Dad, don't let Willow see my medical report yet. In 10 days, can you arrange a fake death for me? During the 5 months Willow was missing, perhaps because of overwhelming grief that weakened my immune system, I was diagnosed with an early tumor. At first, everything was under control. The biopsy was benign. As long as I had the tumor quietly removed, Willow would never know about it. Maybe one day, when the truth came out, it would be when I had already fully recovered. But now, I didn't want Willow to know anything anymore. I wanted to fake my death, leave the country, and sever all ties with Willow forever. My father instantly sensed something was wrong. When he heard the whole story, his fury knew no bounds. Give me 10 days. I promise I'll arrange your fake death and send you abroad without alerting Willow. From then on, The two of you will be completely severed, never again any ties. I nodded and silently hung up the phone. Just 10 days. In only 10 days, I could escape this nightmare. I wouldn't have to face the men who stole my wife, nor the illegitimate child that brought me humiliation. Just 10 days, and I would cut ties with Willow forever, never to have anything to do with her again in this lifetime. Chapter 2. The cafe waiter brought me a freshly ground coffee, smiling warmly. It's been a while since you came. Here, your favorite washed beans. You really are family. Even your tastes are so alike. I abruptly lifted my head. What do you mean, family? The shop assistant looked a bit surprised. Miss Lou came today with a gentleman to buy coffee. That gentleman said he had never drunk coffee before, that it was too high-end for him, but he was lucky because of the child Miss Lou is carrying. After hearing that, Miss Lou's expression turned really bad, and she served him this washed coffee bean, even saying that he would definitely like it. I thought Miss Lou looked angry. Maybe that gentleman did something wrong, but really, her eyes were full of care and affection. Mr. Wong, you're truly blessed to have such a good wife. She even treats relatives with such devotion. Willow's love for her husband was something everyone knew, so of course the waiter assumed that man was a family member. I clenched the coffee cup in my hand and gave a bitter laugh. So this was the tenderness hidden beneath Willow's outward mask of hatred whenever she mentioned that man. She could never forget him. All along, she had been lying to me. Through the rising steam, I heard my own quiet voice whisper, yes. I really did marry a good wife. After the waiter left, I received a message from Willow. Darling, I'm at the office. I'll come pick you up from the cafe now. I lowered my head, the corners of my lips curling into a smile uglier than tears. Deception, infidelity, betrayal. The three things a marriage can never tolerate. My wife, who once put me first in everything, had done them all, and she still swore that the person she loved most in this life was me. I sat there in silence for a long time, until the sound of a chair being pulled out came from across the table. Looking up, my eyes met Makoto's. The man opposite me was handsome. His tanned skin gave him a wild vitality. Unlike me, raised in privilege, he carried a style utterly different from the young heirs of the city. No wonder Willow, who had seen all kinds of men, had fallen for him without even realizing it. Makoto narrowed his eyes slightly and loudly called, "Waiter, order," drawing everyone's attention in the cafe. When asked what he wanted to drink, Makoto waved his hand. "Bring me the most expensive one. This man across from me is paying." I gave another bitter smile. So it was this crude man who had stolen away my childhood sweetheart, my wife. It was like a loud slap across my face, merciless and stinging. How laughable, I said coldly. What's the matter? Willow didn't give you money? Makoto sneered. Quit pretending, you coward. In that instant, I clenched my cup, veins bulging at my temples, barely suppressing the raging fury that surged within me. I wanted to throw the whole cup of milk straight onto this foul-mouthed man's head. I'm telling you, I will never give up on Willow. Makoto glared at me with vicious eyes. My grandmother always said, with my good looks, I deserve to marry the richest and most beautiful woman in the world. So what if Willow is your wife? Didn't she already bring me home? I almost laughed from sheer anger. Raising my hand, I cut off Makoto's vulgar ranting and looked at him coldly with disdain. A woman who 2 times and can't even control herself. If you want her, take her. I don't care. Makoto's eyes widened, his lips trembling with hatred. Why did George get to stand so high above him? Why did George get to speak to him in such a condescending tone? Rage surged in Makoto's chest. George, I know Willow is on her way here to pick you up. Do you believe that if I call her right now and say I'm upset, she'll turn the car around immediately to come to me, without sparing a thought for your life or death? My throat tightened, but I masked the surge of fear and sorrow in my heart with an unshakable exterior. I tugged at the corner of my lips. Go ahead. Just don't drag me into your little flirting games with Willow. I don't have that fetish. It's disgusting. Makoto suddenly grabbed my arm and shoved me hard back into my seat. I felt my already frail body collapse like a tower of blocks, and I let out a muffled groan. The smile on Makoto's face twisted with a trace of menace. What's the matter? You don't dare. Makoto had already swiped open his phone and, right in front of me, dialed the number saved as wife. George, just watch. Chapter 3. What now? Through the loudspeaker of the phone, Willow's voice came across both clear and distant, as if from another world. Willow, I'm feeling down. Makoto lowered his voice, even carrying a hint of a whine. What are you trying to stir up again? Willow's voice was filled with helplessness and irritation. Can't you just calm down for once? Makoto. I just feel unhappy. Makoto coughed twice. New dads often feel this emptiness inside. Willow, can you come keep me company? Makoto, you're such a burden. Willow sounded suffocated, but I still heard the sound of her turning on the blinker without hesitation. I fell into a blank daze, flooded by painful memories. When Willow and I had just gotten married, I often had restless thoughts, thinking of myself as a useless, sickly man. I would lie awake at night, secretly crying, even though I bit my teeth tightly every time to keep silent, not wanting to wake Willow, who had to work at the conglomerate the next day, nor to let her think her husband was weak. Willow would always, before my second tear fell, open her eyes without hesitation and hold me in her arms. Don't be afraid, George. Back then, Willow's tenderness was infinite. Why are you always afraid I'll abandon you? You are the man I love most in my life. No matter what happens, I will always be by your side. But later, Willow disappeared. When I was first diagnosed with the tumor, I endured both physical and psychological torment, crying silently through the nights as I missed someone who might never return. Now Willow had come back, but my illness had reached its most dangerous point. The woman who once treated me as her very life had abandoned her vows and her love, using the same tenderness on the very men who wounded me to the bone. In that moment, even my heart seemed to falter, on the verge of stopping its beat. Makoto's voice continued, pitiful, Willow, but I really feel so bad. This place feels so strange. I want to go back to my hometown. Fine, stay put. This is the last time. Do you hear me? Absolutely no next time. From now on, don't bother me with useless calls. With that, Willow hung up the phone. The next moment, my phone buzzed with a message. Darling, something urgent came up at the conglomerate. I need to go back to the office. I'm sorry, baby. I already sent the driver to pick you up. Tonight, I'll make your favorite chicken noodle soup to make it up to you. Love you, hubby. It was followed by 3 emojis of little kneeling figures, appearing so casual, as if nothing had happened, as if she really was just going back to the conglomerate to handle emergency business, not abandoning her gravely ill husband just to accompany a man whose very existence in this world was a mistake. I shut my eyes in pain, a constricting ache tightening in my chest. Cold sweat broke out on my forehead as my knuckles turned white from clenching the edge of the table so hard. Makoto arrogantly tossed his phone aside with a mocking laugh. Well, didn't I tell you already? If you know what's good for you, leave Willow early. I said it before, she only has me in her heart now. So what if she once loved you most? People change. And so did she. Yes, promises only count when people are still in love. I blinked away the mist gathering in my eyes, forcing my ailing body upright, and gave a sharp-edged smile. As you wish. I'll give her to you. A woman this tainted, I don't want her either. Makoto gave a dismissive chuckle, crudely lifting the luxury suit Willow had bought for him and swaggering out of the cafe. Calmly, I moved my lips and pressed the stop button on my phone's recording app. From the moment I had seen Makoto, I had been recording everything. When I completely severed ties with Willow, I would send her all the evidence in one package. I would never forgive Willow. Mr. Wong, Mr. Wong. The waiter's voice jolted me awake, and only then did I realize the suffocating pain in my chest hadn't gone away. You don't look well at all. The waiter looked panicked, while my vision blurred under the waves of unbearable pain crashing inside me. Call an ambulance. My chest hurt so much. Struggling to get the words out, I collapsed forward, and everything went black. Chapter 4. When I woke up, I was in the hospital. The moment I opened my eyes, the stark whiteness of the ward made me dizzy. The faint smell of disinfectant lingered at the tip of my nose, and for a moment I felt a desolate illusion. Instinctively, I pressed my hand to my chest, then exhaled a long breath of relief. Beside me, my mother's eyes were red. George, what gave you such a fright all of a sudden? The doctor said your body is already weak, and now this sudden shock, you need to rest for a few days. Next time, you mustn't be so reckless. You're ill now. You can't do any heavy work at all. Understand? I nodded wearily. Suddenly, the familiar and anxious sound of footsteps rushed from the doorway. George, George. Willow, her forehead covered in sweat and her beautiful eyes bloodshot, ran toward me clutching her belly. How are you? I turned my head away, unwilling to look at this hypocritical woman, yet still spoke softly. Be careful of the baby. I'm sorry. Willow staggered and fell to her knees by my bed, devoutly cupping my hand against her eyes. Her voice fractured and choked. In moments, I felt the tears soaking into my palm. It's all my fault for not picking you up. It's all my fault. I knew your body was always frail. I should never have let other matters delay me. You are the most important person in my life. The young nurse who had followed Willow inside couldn't help speaking up for her. Seeing my indifferent expression, Mr. Wong, Miss Liu used every connection she had to contact the best doctors the moment she knew you were hospitalized. She even went mad with worry, mobilizing every national blood bank for your blood type, and then rushed here without sparing her own life to see you. Out of Willow's sight, tears slowly slid down my face, soaking into the pillow. When we had just gotten married, Willow was the same, wanting to place the stars and moon in my hands, even if I didn't need them. She never stopped trying to mend anything that could possibly make me unhappy. Afraid she couldn't care for my frail body, she grew so anxious she couldn't sleep at night. At midnight, She would crawl out of bed to check the profiles of the live-in maids her secretary sent her. Over the course of a month, she interviewed nearly 200 top-tier nannies and dismissed them all. Normally gentle, she once slammed the table in fury, jabbing her secretary in the nose as she cursed. George only eats porridge when it's thickened to just the right consistency. The rice must bloom but not be mushy. The temperature can't be too hot or too cold. How can you not even time it properly? They don't even know how to pick papayas. Too many fibers. They boil sago until it turns mushy. They can't even make a well-done steak tender enough to chew. George is frail and picky. His choices are already limited. If they can't even handle this, how dare they call themselves top-tier nannies? Who did you find? Listening to Willow's extreme demands, the secretary left the office in tears. At that time, the whole conglomerate lived in fear. Within 2 weeks, 5 of Willow's personal assistants had been replaced. In the end, a woman worth billions of dollars, the head of a vast empire, would rush home every noon just to cook for me, losing over 10 pounds in a single month. Once, she even rushed to a meeting still wearing her apron. It wasn't until the board reminded her near the end that she noticed, and the incident became a citywide anecdote in a city. Back then, Willow truly remembered every one of my preferences, held them in her heart, and followed them as if they were sacred decrees. Why did it turn into this now? Silent tears streamed down my face, just like half a year ago when I was first diagnosed with the tumor, helpless and hopeless. But unlike half a year ago, Willow didn't realize her husband was crying before the second tear even fell. Through my blurry vision, I looked at the electronic clock by the bed. 5 days. In 5 days, I would no longer have to think about these heart-shattering matters. I would bury the George and Willow of the past forever, and begin a new life. Chapter 5. Willow pushed aside all her responsibilities at the conglomerate. With a look of deep devotion, she stayed by my side without leaving for even a step. It wasn't until evening, after everyone else had left, that Willow handed me a document and hesitantly spoke. "George, can we file for a fake divorce first?" Willow closed her eyes in pain. "Makoto, the man who picked me up when I lost my memory, he's making trouble. If I don't divorce you, he'll take me to court to fight for custody of the child. George, I'm only doing this to placate him. The one I love most has always been you." I stared at her numbly. The woman I once loved so deeply suddenly looked unbearably repulsive. Willow's gaze was filled with both tension and expectation. I silently signed the agreement, no longer listening to her endless words, and went to sleep on my own. From that day on, my condition worsened. I often slipped into bouts of unconsciousness, yet every time I woke, I saw Willow beside me, her eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. I was in an intensive care ward, but Willow refused to sleep on the attendant's bed. Even though she herself was still pregnant, she ignored all persuasion. When exhaustion truly overcame her, Willow would cradle her belly and lean back in the chair, dozing for a short while. Yet she always kept one hand touching my skin. "This way, if you feel uncomfortable, I'll be the first to know." Her eyes were still as tender and lingering, as if she were looking at the one true love she had vowed to cherish forever. I couldn't help but wonder, was this how she looked at Makoto when she lost her memory? I gave no response to Willow's self-congratulatory behavior. After all my vital signs were already being monitored in real time by high-end medical technology. What was the point of such hollow gestures? Yet the entire hospital was moved. Every time the nurse came to change my medicine, she looked at me with envy. "Mr. Wong, you're so lucky. Your wife brought 10 top chefs here today to cook a feast for the whole hospital, just so we'd care for you better. If it weren't for regulations, I think Miss Liu would have donated a fortune to replace all the equipment with brand new ones. How are you so blessed?" On one of my short walks, I even saw a patient scolding his wife, pinching her arm. He shouted that since both were wives, why was the woman in the intensive care ward so devoted to her husband, losing sleep over the smallest illness, while his own wife didn't care whether he lived or died? I thought bitterly. Willow never cared whether I lived or died when she proposed a fake divorce, when she kept another man outside, or when she left a tumor patient alone under the scorching summer sun. Yet every time I heard these words, Willow would look at me with tearful, hopeful eyes, as if begging me to believe in her love again. I wanted to cry and laugh all at once. I understood Willow far too well. She knew she had done wrong, so she wanted to make a grand show of devotion to me, using these hollow praises from outsiders to patch over the pain and emptiness inside my heart. But only a guilty conscience would work so desperately to prove itself. So when facing Willow's gaze, I merely forced out a perfunctory smile and nodded faintly. 2 days after staying in the hospital, I woke from another bout of sleep to find Willow unusually absent. And from the doorway came the sound of an argument. "I told you already, you are never to appear in front of George again. Are you treating my words like air?" The man's voice was full of self-righteousness. "Your ex-husband is in the hospital. As the real father of your child, what's wrong with me visiting him? Isn't that just basic courtesy?" You city people always love your twisted rules, now suddenly I'm the one in the wrong. I didn't even touch the fine food and wine your mother made for me, I brought them here for your ex-husband. And you're standing here giving me attitude. Willow, terrified of waking the unconscious me, hissed in a sharp whisper, who gave you permission to call George my ex-husband? Makoto pressed harder, his voice aggressive. Didn't the two of you already divorce? What's wrong with me calling him your ex-husband? Or is it that you've been lying to me all along, that you never intended to recognize me as the father of your son in your belly? Fine then, go abort the baby right now. You're in the hospital anyway, just say the word. At the thought of that signed divorce agreement, irritation, anxiety, and a subtle unease welled up in Willow's heart. She pressed a hand over his mouth, her head aching. That's not what I meant. Keep your voice down, don't make a scene. Another rush of hurried footsteps followed. It must have been Willow dragging Makoto out into the corridor. Moments later, my mother entered with a dark expression. Mom, you saw it all? I gave a weak, self-mocking smile. That's the man. In silence, my mother tucked in my blanket and turned her back, her eyes secretly reddening. She, too, had watched Willow grow up. She never imagined that girl would become like this. And her best friend Sandra, my mother-in-law, hadn't shown her face once since my hospitalization. Instead, she eagerly cooked meals for Makoto. I pointed at the electronic calendar on the wall. 4 more days, Mom. Curling up in the snow-white sheets, I realized my face had grown gaunt in just a few short days. My mother sighed. Your father's preparations are nearly finished. Soon, very soon, you'll be free of all this. Blankly, I stared at the ceiling. I was leaving. All those vows of undying love, those promises sworn to the heavens, would fade with time. But the wounds in my heart, how would they ever heal? Chapter 6. I no longer wanted to lie in bed. With my mother's support, I slowly walked downstairs to get some air. But as I stood on the staircase, I suddenly heard waves of shrill screams from the crowd. A tall man was wildly brandishing a boning knife, charging madly through the people like a lunatic. You killed my father. I'll kill you all. I'll kill you. The crowd screamed and retreated in panic. My mother clutched my arm nervously. George, let's go back upstairs quickly. I pulled my mother into the corner of the staircase. Mom, don't make a sound. Don't draw attention. Through the gaps in the railing, I could clearly see that man's deranged eyes. His mental state had clearly collapsed under the shock, and cold sweat was forming in my palms. Then I heard a familiar, trembling shout. Don't come near me. Don't come near me. The shout immediately caught the man's attention. Raising his knife, he charged straight toward it. Makoto, never having seen anything like this before, stumbled clumsily, his left foot tripping over his right. He fell heavily on his backside, his legs turning to jelly, unable to get back up. The knife was about to plunge into Makoto's chest when Willow's eyes nearly split open. Without caring for her pregnant body, she hurled herself forward, shielding Makoto from that fatal strike. In that instant, my eyes widened, my jaw clenched, and even my heart nearly stopped beating. The rushing security guards managed to pin the crazed man to the ground, but blood was already spreading rapidly beneath Willow's body. Willow, don't scare me. How are you? Makoto, shocked and terrified, held Willow's limp body in his arms, bawling in despair. Don't cry. Willow struggled to raise her hand, wiping away the tears at the corner of Makoto's eyes. Her face was filled with comfort and tenderness. Makoto, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. I never dared to tell you, but I've actually loved you for a long time. I just couldn't give up George, so I kept running from my true feelings and never admitted that I loved you. On her face was that familiar yet unfamiliar tenderness, an expression I had seen countless times, but always when it was directed at me. Even if I really die, all my property will go to you. George has his parents, but you only have me. Don't cry, and don't be afraid. It'll be okay. Do you hear me? I'll give birth to this baby safely. Don't worry. People around them had already started crying with Makoto. Make way. Make way. Medical staff rushed over, placing Willow on a stretcher and running her toward the emergency room. Willow. Makoto grabbed onto the stretcher, chasing after it, unable to say anything but cries. The stretcher vanished at the far end of the corridor, but I remained curled in the stairwell corner, my soul slipping out of my body, my face twisted with both tears and laughter. What had Willow just said? She said she had long been in love with Makoto, only unwilling to admit it. She said she would leave all her property to Makoto and the child, because I still had my family. She said she loved Makoto. Unconsciously, tears streamed down my face in heavy drops. It felt like my heart was being torn into pieces, while a suffocating pain spread through my chest. Shaking, I tried to use my mother's arm for support to stand up, but my body felt utterly drained, collapsing back again and again. My mother cried too, summoning every ounce of strength to help her son. Supporting each other, we finally managed to stand, but before we had taken 2 steps, a short-haired, Dark-skinned woman came rushing down the stairs with her head lowered. As we brushed shoulders, I caught a fleeting glint of malice in her eyes. You made Makoto suffer. Who the hell do you think you are? Go to hell. The next moment, the woman rammed her elbow brutally into me, sending me tumbling hard down the staircase. Thud, 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 thud. Chapter 7. When I woke up, I neither cried nor raged. I simply rested my hand quietly on my lifeless legs. Mr. Wong, from this fall, the rest of your life, you may never stand again. The doctor sighed heavily. Your recovery had been promising, but because chemotherapy weakened your bones, they became brittle. With proper care and calcium supplements, you could have. But he couldn't go on. He left the ward in silence. The air inside the ward froze into unbearable stillness. In a hoarse voice, I spoke. It's Willow's fault. If it hadn't been for Makoto, I would never have suffered such a devastating shock while sick, and I wouldn't have been shoved down the stairs by a woman connected to him. The root of all of this was Willow. Coldly, I lifted my eyelids. Keep my paralysis report. Once I've left the country, send it to Willow along with the hospital hallway surveillance footage and the documents I've prepared, and my father's prepared fake death certificate. There was only 1 day left until the private jet's departure. My body was extremely weak, yet I couldn't bear another day in this place that caused me such agony. Helpless, my father gathered an entire medical team to accompany me to America. When it was almost time to be discharged, I was signing the mountain of documents and consent forms. Among them was one for a miscarriage. Looking up, the young nurse said awkwardly, Miss Liu had a miscarriage. I nodded without sorrow or joy, but when I reached the column where the child's name was to be signed, I fell silent. My fingers clutched the pen so tightly they trembled. My whole body shook. I had once looked forward to this child's birth. I had even ordered adorable custom clothes for the baby and written a long letter for Willow, intending to give it to her when the baby turned 1 month old. But in the end, it was all just my own foolish wishful thinking. The nurse, unable to watch, took the paper and whispered, the baby's name is Mako. Right, I'll sign it for you. My eyes flew open. What did you say? Startled, the nurse stammered. Isn't it? My colleague said, when Miss Liu was being resuscitated, she kept unconsciously crying out, Mako, Mako. I thought that was the name of your child together. After all, everyone knows how much you two loved each other, so deeply, so enviably. So I assumed that while she was on the brink of death, aside from calling your name, Mr. Wong, she would also cry the baby's nickname. Expressionless, my face turned deathly pale. I had thought my pain had long since numbed me, that I could never feel that heart-rending agony again. But now, a dense, needle-pricking ache rose once more from deep in my heart and lungs. When Willow was near death, she hadn't thought of me. The only one in her mind was the men who had dragged us into this abyss of ruin. I forced a smile uglier than tears at the panicked nurse. Makoto is the name of the man Willow risked her life to save. The true father of her unborn child. He's the reason I lost the use of my legs. He's the reason Willow wants to divorce me. With a clatter, the nurse dropped the pen in her hand. Her eyes instantly read, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Mr. Wong, I didn't know. It's not your fault. Closing my eyes, tears rolled down relentlessly. I'm leaving the hospital. If Willow survives, please keep it from her for a while. Don't tell her I've already been discharged. The young nurse nodded frantically through her tears, took my signed papers, and fled the ward. Exhausted, I was wheeled out in a special wheelchair and taken directly to the private jet, already fully equipped with medical facilities. In the faint smell of disinfectant and the suffocating pressure of takeoff, I felt as if I had returned to the brightly lit operating room, reliving the despair when the doctors sighed as they operated on my legs. The massive Boeing jet soared into the sky. Through tear-filled eyes, I gazed at the neat rows of skyscrapers in the capital, my fingernails digging deep into my palms. Willow, farewell. Let us never meet again. I told you before, I will never, ever forgive you. Chapter 8. Willow woke up in pain. The knife had narrowly missed her heart, stabbing beneath her ribs. Only then did Willow barely escape death. The instant she jolted awake, Willow's eyes flew open wide as she sat up, only to collapse back down under the unbearable pain. Makoto, panicked, pressed the emergency bell while holding her down. Don't move suddenly. Be careful, or the wound will split open. You're very fragile right now. Willow felt pain everywhere, and her head spun. That's normal blood loss symptoms. Don't worry, you're no longer in mortal danger. Willow shook her head, trying to dispel the dizziness, but it only grew worse. She had a gut feeling she had forgotten something important. Is the baby okay? She clutched her stomach, looking at Makoto with desperate hope. Makoto looked stunned. After a moment, he avoided her gaze and said, We can still have a child in the future. Willow froze for 2 seconds. In that instant, she even forgot about her own miscarriage, suddenly remembering George was still in the hospital ward. George. Instinctively, Willow tried to sit up again. She ripped out her 4 attempting to jump off the bed, yet the moment she moved, the pain twisted her delicate features beyond recognition. You're still thinking about him. Makoto's eyes brimmed with tears, red with fury. You've been unconscious for 7 days since the accident, and George hasn't come to see you once, and still, you can't forget him. You've even miscarried, and George doesn't care at all, not one bit. Because it's not his child. Willow blurted it out, but the point she seized on was entirely different from Makoto's. I've been unconscious for 7 days. Her face showed raw anxiety. I don't know how George is doing. Makoto's mouth twitched slightly, a flash of resentment flickering in his eyes. Even now, Willow still cared about George. He had kept vigil at her bedside without sleep for 7 days straight. Yet when Willow finally woke, all she cared about was George, who hadn't come once. She didn't spare a thought for him. Suppressing the bitterness and anger in his chest, Makoto gently pushed Willow back onto the bed. There's no need to rush, he said softly. I know you care about George. I've already gone to see him. The doctor said he's recovering well. Nothing serious. He should be discharged and back home before long. Only then did Willow breathe a sigh of relief. As long as George is fine. She didn't dare imagine how mad George would become if something happened to him. George was the most important person in her entire life, without exception. The doctor came in for rounds and gave Willow a brief physical checkup. Miss Liu, the wound is healing well. For the next few days, avoid strenuous activity, and keep a light diet to prevent the stitches from splitting or the wound from getting infected. You've just had a miscarriage, your body is very weak, so you must take good care. And you also need to maintain a good mood. Don't let your emotions swing too violently, or it will affect your recovery. Willow thanked him politely, then suddenly remembered something and carefully instructed the doctor. Doctor, please, don't tell George about my accident. I'm afraid he'll be upset if he gets another shock. The doctor's expression froze for a second, complicated, but in the end he still nodded. I understand. Mr. Wang, he's in pretty good condition. Miss Liu, you don't have to worry. Willow didn't notice the unnatural look on the doctor's face. Once she received the reassurance, she completely relaxed, as if a great weight had been lifted. Thank you so much. Her face, pale from blood loss, turned toward the doctor. For the time being, I won't go see George. I'm afraid he'll worry. If he asks about me, please just tell him that I was here while he was asleep, but left because I had company business and couldn't wait for him to wake up. As for the supplies and equipment I prepared for George, please make sure the hospital keeps them safe. He'll need them sooner or later. And the head chef I hired for the hospital cafeteria, please let him stay. George will probably need more care when he's sick in the future, so I'll be troubling you to take extra care of him. Listening to Willow's meticulous instructions, the doctor's expression grew even more complicated. I understand. Miss Liu, if there's nothing else, I'll leave you to rest. You need recuperation now. Willow nodded. Watching the doctor leave, the ward was left with only Makoto and Willow. Makoto buried his head in Willow's palm, tears streaming down. You scared me to death. Choking back sobs, Makoto said. How could you risk your life like that? How could you bear to leave me and our child behind? Do you know how terrified I was? I was so afraid you'd die right in front of me. What would I do then? Willow gently patted his head. I'm still here, aren't I? And how could I just stand by and watch you get hurt right in front of me? Even if we lost the baby, we'll still have another in the future. Makoto, with eyes as red as a rabbit's, stared at Willow intently. Willow, do you love me? Under the burning weight of his gaze, Willow, fully conscious, fell into silence. The ward grew quiet, filled only with Makoto's faint sobs and uneven breathing. Yes, only after a very long time did Willow painfully close her eyes and admit the truth. When she opened them again, her eyes were full of struggle and love, tangled together as she looked at Makoto's face filled with hope. I love you. Chapter 9. During those 5 months in the small mountain village, Willow was not the lofty Miss Liu, but merely an ordinary woman, amnesiac and useless, and Makoto was nothing more than a man who had lost both parents and lived alone. It couldn't be denied that Makoto harbored improper feelings toward her, deliberately concealing her past. But in those 5 months, Makoto truly loved her with all his heart. Since childhood, Willow had been a pampered princess who didn't know the difference between rice and wheat. Let alone survive in a backward mountain village, her survival skills were basically zero. It was Makoto who desperately dragged her back home from the forest, healed her wounds with herbs, and cared for her meticulously. At that time, Makoto's smile was pure, like the wildflowers blooming all over the mountains, so full of life, dazzling enough to almost scorch the eyes. A boy shining as brilliantly as the sun. Willow didn't want to be a useless burden, so when Makoto went out, she secretly tried to cook on the clay stove, but nearly burned down the whole kitchen. When Makoto came home and saw Willow covered in soot and clumsily putting out the fire, he couldn't help but laugh and cry at the same time, wiping her beautiful face clean with a cloth. These things, I'll do them. You're my woman, you don't need to do anything. When Willow was stared at by Makoto, whose eyes were as clear and bright as a young deer's, she could hear her own heart beating wildly. It was a feeling George, the proud, aloof young master who had always protected her like a little brother since childhood, could never give her. That night, Makoto came back with 2 bottles of beer. The ale was rich and fiery, and with just 1 glass, Willow's face flushed red. She didn't know whether it was the dim candlelight or the strong ale, but she felt like she was floating among the clouds, her whole body light and weightless. Makoto, you're so good-looking. Makoto also blushed, showing Willow his young, firm body. That night became the beginning of Willow's mistakes, one after another. She stopped questioning why she didn't fit in with the dilapidated mountain village, stopped questioning why she seemed to have forgotten something so important, and stopped questioning the truth of everything Makoto told her. We are husband and wife. You are my wife. Yes. Willow caught Makoto's restless hand, kissed it again and again at her lips. We are husband and wife. You are my husband. Makoto laughed out loud, bright and carefree, but when Willow accidentally fell, hitting her head against the doorframe and regaining her memory, she could hardly face Makoto's gaze, full of devotion and love. At that moment, Willow's psychological defenses completely collapsed. She lashed out, scolding Makoto harshly, then threw down a large sum of money and hurriedly left the small village. But later, when Makoto sought her out and said he knew the child she carried was his, Willow's first reaction was not fear, but joy. Willow thought she must be insane. An accident had split her once perfect, stable life into an unforeseen detour, and the worst part was, she realized she was somewhat intoxicated by it. Before her childhood sweetheart and husband George, she was still the good wife, the good mother, but Willow couldn't deny her feelings for Makoto. What's more, they now had a child. George's body was frail, and they might never have a healthy child of their own. And for such a massive corporation, the heir couldn't be a sickly weakling. Willow kept trying to convince herself, once the child was born, she would hand it over to George to raise, and she would also ensure Makoto lived a life of comfort and privilege. But Willow forgot, one person cannot belong to 2 families at the same time. Chapter 10. Sandra came to the hospital ward very often. Each time she not only brought Willow's hospital meals but also food she had cooked for Makoto. Sandra, attentive and distressed, took care of her pale-faced daughter, and inevitably held some resentment toward Makoto. If he hadn't suddenly fallen, you wouldn't have been hurt at all. Sandra went on and on complaining while feeding Willow. A country bumpkin who's never seen the world, this is what happens. He can't even handle the slightest thing. I'm really sick of it. Hearing Sandra's words becoming more and more excessive, Willow couldn't help interrupting. Mom, stop it. Makoto didn't do it on purpose. Sandra, still disgruntled, set aside the now empty dishes, planning to take them back for the servants to wash. Willow asked again, Mom, have you gone to see George recently? I haven't been able to see him during this time. Please visit him more often for me. Oh, and Mom, don't tell George about my miscarriage. I'm afraid his body is so weak, he'd only worry about me. Thinking about how sad George must have been during her 5 months of disappearance, Willow's voice grew hoarse. He's already worried about me, more than enough. Willow remained immersed in her own sorrow, not noticing that Sandra's expression had grown so ugly that no amount of effort could hide it. Once out of the ward, Sandra turned her undisguisedly hostile face toward Makoto. Why is Willow still thinking about George? Weren't they already divorced? Hearing Sandra's voice laced with obvious malice, Makoto lowered his head submissively. Auntie, I don't know either. Sandra found Makoto's humble attitude both pleasing and a little contemptible. She rubbed her temples tiredly. Be more mindful. Don't let Willow keep thinking about George. Oh, and George's disappearance, Willow still doesn't know. Don't tell her yet. Wait until she finds out herself. If she never finds out, that would be even better. Sandra's tone shifted slightly, and Makoto immediately brightened. Yes, Auntie, I understand. I'll take good care of Willow's health, and also take care of myself. Hearing Makoto place Willow's well-being before his own, Sandra nodded with satisfaction. Don't call me Auntie anymore. We'll be family sooner or later. Call me Mom. Makoto froze for a moment, then, overjoyed, called out crisply, Mom. Sandra nodded reservedly and turned to leave. When Sandra was gone, a woman hiding in the shadows finally dared to step out timidly. Makoto. The woman's hair was chopped short and jagged like a dog had chewed it off. Her shoes had 2 holes worn through, and her short-sleeved shirt was frayed at the edges. She looked utterly shabby, completely out of place in the luxurious hospital ward. Makoto frowned. I told you not to come find me anymore. Are you out of money again? The woman mumbled and nodded. Makoto closed his eyes briefly, then pulled out 20,000 yuan from his bag. Take it. This should last you a long time. From now on, don't appear in front of me again. Willow must never discover our relationship. The woman's face showed a twisted mix of resentment and unwillingness. Yet her eyes on Makoto were filled with obsession. Makoto, could we? Her hand crept onto Makoto's chest uncontrollably. Makoto jerked back as though burned, glanced warily at the hallway surveillance camera, then glared at her in warning. Be careful, this isn't the village. The woman dropped her head gloomily, revealing a faint scar on the side of her neck. Thinking of the past, Makoto's heart softened despite himself, and he shoved another 10,000 yuan into her hands. Enough, just go. I'll stress this one last time, Willow must never see you. Do you hear me? Clutching the thick stack of cash, the woman finally smiled and turned to leave. Makoto watched her go, biting his lip in irritation. If George were here, he would have immediately recognized this woman entangled with Makoto as the very one who had pushed him down the stairs, making him lose his legs. Chapter 11. Another week passed, and Willow was finally able to stand up. Before Makoto could rejoice, Willow had already ordered a full-length mirror, an entire set of outfits, and a stylist to be brought in. The stylist helped Willow change clothes and lightly touched up her somewhat haggard face. Miss Liu, this way your complexion looks much better. There shouldn't be any flaws. Willow studied herself in the mirror, reluctantly satisfied. George had loved her face since childhood. He had been jealous countless times whenever Willow received too many love confessions and letters from other boys, always getting upset until Willow coaxed him for a long time. So later, whenever she entered a new environment and others asked if she had a boyfriend, Willow always kept a tacit attitude, even though back then she wasn't yet ready to confess her feelings to George. So sooner or later, they would end up together. That was what Willow thought at the time, and even her ears turned red. Lost in her memories, Willow's face involuntarily carried a smile. Makoto had no idea why Willow was suddenly dressing up so carefully. What else could it be for? Makoto thought of a possibility that made his heart pound, and he couldn't help but show delight. He stepped beside Willow, straightened her collar gently, and said softly, "You look beautiful. I really like it." He was already anticipating Willow saying the words he had waited so long to hear. "Makoto, let's get married." Just imagining it made Makoto's fingers tighten with excitement. His heart felt like it was about to leap out of his chest, but Willow brushed away Makoto's hand, frowning as she fixed the wrinkles he had left on her collar. "It's wrinkled. You really don't know how to handle these things. I should change." "Forget it. This is the first dress George gave me. I'll make do with it." Willow was entirely preoccupied with how she looked in the mirror. "How do I look?" Makoto, still stung from being brushed off, forced a strained smile. "Very beautiful, very charming." Willow continued on her own. "Good. That way, when I go see George, he won't notice that I had a miscarriage. I can't let George worry anymore. It's been such a long time since I saw him. I don't know if George is angry with me." Willow put on her coat and was about to step out the door. Makoto could hardly believe his ears. So Willow had dressed up like this, just so she could go see George without raising suspicion. Makoto clenched his fists so tightly that his nails dug deep into his palms. Before leaving, Willow turned to ask the secretary standing in the room, "Have all the clothes and new furniture I bought for George arrived?" The secretary nodded respectfully. "Yes, everything has arrived. The villa you selected has already been renovated. The clothes and gifts you personally chose have been carefully packed by professional artists. The Italian custom furniture has been delivered to your home and installed by the workers." The secretary handed over a stack of photos. Makoto, sharp-eyed, saw the luxurious villa in the pictures, gleaming with a brand new look. "I've never seen a wife so thoughtful." The secretary flattered with a smile. "Mr. Wang is truly enviable." Willow smiled faintly. She hoped George would be happy with this gift. The villa was in a scenic suburban area, the perfect place for George to recuperate and restore the vitality he had recently lost. Makoto, unwilling, muttered, "And me, Willow, nothing for me?" Willow looked surprised. "Haven't I already arranged your apartment? I bought you so many clothes, there's no need to buy duplicates." Makoto felt as if struck by lightning, but still pressed on stubbornly. "And in the villa? The villa is George's home." Willow glanced at Makoto with some dissatisfaction. "Makoto, you're overstepping." In front of the entire Lu Corporation staff present, Makoto felt as though he had been stripped naked and thrown into the crowd. His whole being was overwhelmed with humiliation. Chapter 12. Willow put on her most perfect smile and gently knocked on the door of George's hospital room. "George?" She called softly, "Are you asleep?" But to Willow's surprise, the nurse in charge of the room tapped her from behind. "Miss, may I ask who you're looking for? The patient in this room just went out for some fresh air. There's no one inside." Willow smiled politely. "I'm looking for George." The nurse asked in surprise. "George? Do you mean Mr. Wang?" A sudden wave of anxiety and unease surged in Willow's chest. Ignoring the nurse's attempt to stop her, she pushed the door open and rushed inside. All of George's belongings had been taken away. The new traces of life left behind clearly weren't to George's taste. The private ward was already occupied by a new patient. Willow looked at the name tag by the bed. No longer was it the handsome face that haunted her every thought, but a kindly smiling elderly woman. The name wasn't George's either. There was no chance of a mistake. The nurse grew anxious. Miss, you can't just barge into other patients' rooms. The person you're looking for isn't here. At that moment, Willow's mind went completely blank. She shoved the nurse aside and stormed down the corridor, flinging open doors one after another. Not this one. Not this one either. None of them. George wasn't here. A stabbing pain shot through Willow's side, and sweat poured down her forehead, but none of the physical pain could outweigh the swelling dread rising in her heart. George, where did he go? Willow didn't notice the familiar doctors and nurses whispering among themselves. The gazes cast upon her were varied, but none could be called kind. Look closer, and you'd see only mockery and disdain. Willow grabbed a nurse she recognized. George, do you know where George Wong is? The nurse cried out in pain from Willow's grip. Seeing this always elegant woman so disheveled and desperate, she felt a twisted sense of satisfaction, thinking of how utterly helpless George had once been. Mr. Wong. Her tone toward Willow no longer carried the respect or admiration it once did. She raised her chin slightly, feigning great confusion. Mr. Wong is your husband. If even you don't know where he is, how could I possibly know? Willow felt something was wrong. She refused to acknowledge the worst possibility. With trembling hands, she pulled out her phone to call George, only to see the display read, "Number not in service." The moment the call disconnected, Willow felt as if struck by lightning. During these 7 bedridden days, she hadn't even sent George a single message. Was it because another man had risked his life for her? Or was it because Willow had finally admitted to that deep-rooted flaw in her heart she never wanted to face, that she couldn't bring herself to confront George? Her face turned ashen, a sickly pale that even foundation couldn't cover, and cold sweat poured from her temples in heavy drops. She felt as though the pain in her ribs and lower abdomen was tearing her apart. The fabric of her blouse over her chest and belly was damp. The stitches might have come undone, but Willow couldn't care about that anymore. She looked at the young nurse before her with almost pleading desperation. You know where George is, don't you? You know where George is, tell me, I beg you. Please tell me. The young nurse turned her head away, unwilling to look at this woman's false face any longer. I'm truly sorry, Miss Liu. I don't know what a good actress this woman is, the nurse thought coldly, her gaze growing more indifferent. So this was how she deceived Mr. Wong, wasn't it? Deceived him until he lost his marriage, lost his legs, and nearly lost his young life on the operating table. The pain had grown so severe Willow could no longer stand. She slid slowly down the wall, her lips drained of all color, whispering George's name in a faint murmur. Doctors rushed over to support her. Miss Liu, you just had surgery. You can't endure such strenuous activity or emotional agitation. The stitches have torn. Quick, get a stretcher. She needs to be sewn up again. Willow's eyes were vacant, staring blankly at the ceiling. George. George, the young nurse, pushed into the corner of the crowd, still heard Willow's murmur clearly. At the brink of life and death on the operating table, she hadn't thought of Mr. Wong, but now that he had disappeared, suddenly she cared again. The nurse gave a faint, mocking laugh. A woman's heart really can't hold 2 men at once. Chapter 13. After Willow's wound was stitched up again, her complexion turned utterly dreadful. When the secretary, ordered to investigate George's whereabouts, delivered the information, Willow's face visibly worsened, dark clouds gathering over her expression. You're saying George was discharged from the hospital half a month ago? The secretary was drenched in cold sweat. Yes, Miss Liu, he was inwardly crying. Ever since Miss Liu's accident, all his focus had been on the company and on taking care of her. How could he ever have imagined that Mr. Wong, who had always been so devoted to her, would suddenly disappear? Any other news? So George is missing now, and none of you can find out where he is. The secretary shrank back and nodded. All traces of Mr. Wong had been deliberately erased. Even after mobilizing every resource of the Liu Corporation in an all-out search, the only result was discovering that Mr. Wong had completed discharge procedures half a month ago. Get out, all of you, get out. Ignoring the concern of nurses and Makoto, Willow smashed everything within reach and drove everyone away. When Sandra heard, she rushed to the hospital. Willow, what on earth is wrong with you? Willow's face was blank. George. George doesn't want me anymore. Her heart felt as if it were splitting into pieces. She couldn't tell if it was heartbreak or the pain of her stitches tearing, but she was drenched in cold sweat, tears of despair streaming down her face. Seeing her daughter like this, Sandra couldn't help feeling a twinge of pity. If George left, then let him go. You two are already divorced anyway. Isn't it a good thing for you and Makoto if he left early? It's been half a month already. Stop dwelling on it. Willow suddenly turned her pale face toward her talkative mother, as though just realizing something. Mom, how do you know George was discharged half a month ago? Sandra's expression froze. Willow recalled her mother's stiff face when she had asked her to visit George, and how Sandra had deliberately avoided mentioning him. "Mom," Willow asked, her voice trembling, "did you already know George was missing?" She was on the verge of collapse. Did you already want me to divorce George?" Sandra turned her gaze away evasively. "Ever since you married him, all your thoughts have been on George. Have you ever cared about me or your father? Your life doesn't revolve around George alone." "Mom." Willow shook violently, almost screaming, "George treated you like his own mother. He's someone you watched grow up since childhood. He showed you more filial piety than I ever did. You think he stole your daughter, is that it?" "Mom, how could you think of George that way? How could you drive him away? How could you let him leave me?" Sandra bit her lip in humiliation, wrinkles deepening into silence. Her usually dignified posture slumped, revealing guilt and weakness. When Sandra was younger, she truly did like George. She hadn't borne a son, so she always carried affection and kindness toward the gentle and refined son of her dearest friend. Her care for George hadn't been entirely false, at least in the beginning. It was genuine. But ever since George and Willow officially got together, Sandra had grown increasingly unsettled. Every weekend, Willow spent her time with George after they bought their marital home. She even moved out of the Liu family estate altogether, coming back only once every 10 days or half a month. Sandra was the very image of a traditional housewife. Her children and husband were her entire world. For a long time after Willow moved out, Sandra couldn't sleep at night, staring at the dark, empty room that would never light up again. She felt like a petty, jealous shrew, yet no matter how much she tried to suppress it, the resentment toward George for stealing Willow never went away. It nearly drowned out all the affection and kindness she had once felt for him. Sandra kept a stubborn silence. The hospital room echoed only with Willow's sobbing, trembling breakdowns. The silence was broken by the secretary, who forced himself to knock and enter. "Miss Liu, a package has arrived for you, sent by Mr. Wang." Like a drowning person grasping at a final piece of driftwood, Willow immediately cried out, "Bring it here, open it for me." Willow tore at the package, her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the scissors. When the cardboard box was opened, what greeted her was a death notice. Inside lay a handwritten note, unmistakably in George's handwriting. "Farewell forever." Willow felt as if she had plunged into an ice abyss. The world spun wildly. The blood in her veins seemed to flow backward. Before her eyes stretched only a wasteland. Seeing her daughter's face go deathly wrong, Sandra leaned over to take a look. The next instant, Sandra let out a scream so piercing it seemed to shatter the sky. Chapter 14. What is this? Sandra trembled as she stumbled 2 steps backward. "Willow, what is this?" The woman's voice was sharp and shrill, filled with an indescribable fear and shock. Willow murmured, "It's George's handwriting." With a scream, Willow flung the death certificate away. "How could George be dead? How is that possible? This can't be real. A tumor? How could that be true? George was healthy. There's no way George could have died of a tumor." Once the death certificate was tossed aside, the rest of the contents in the box were revealed. Several folders, neatly categorized, lying silently inside the cardboard box. But to Willow, those documents were even more terrifying than a ticking time bomb. The first folder contained photocopies of the divorce agreement signed by both George and Willow. At that time, Willow had wanted a fake divorce and coaxed George into signing that divorce agreement. But what Willow had never expected was that George truly intended to divorce her. He no longer wanted to look back, nor reconcile with her ever again. The second folder contained a small USB drive and a stack of photographs. The video files on the USB showed surveillance footage from the entrance of their marital home. Willow watched in horror as she saw herself in the video entangled with Makoto, their clothes disheveled, tumbling onto the bed together, every word they spoke clearly audible. The audio recordings captured the day Willow kicked Makoto out, then went to pick George up, but abandoned him midway when Makoto claimed he was feeling down. Choosing instead to comfort Makoto, they also contained George's bitter, cutting confrontations with Makoto, each instance of provocation laid bare. That cry of pain from George, followed by his cold, detached words, "He's yours," clenched Willow's heart so tightly it almost shattered. So that day George suddenly collapsed. Was it because Makoto ignored her repeated warnings and came to provoke him again? The stack of photos revealed countless images secretly taken by a private investigator, of Willow slipping in and out of Makoto's small apartment late at night. And all the while, at home, her ailing husband was waiting helplessly, believing she was handling business affairs before returning to his side. The instant Willow pieced everything together, even her breathing trembled. The last folder contained all of George's consent forms and medical reports for his tumor surgery. There were even 2 critical condition notices and a certificate of paralysis. The surgery date was shockingly the very same day Willow had her accident. Willow's palms turned ice cold. While she had risked her own life to save Makoto, George had been lying alone on the operating table, losing his young life. So, George really was dead. Willow's vision blurred completely. No, she didn't believe it. She refused to believe it was real. Inside the last folder was also a USB drive. Holding her breath, Willow played the video. It was surveillance footage from the hospital. George was leaning against his mother, despair written all over his face, as he watched Willow take that fatal knife strike for Makoto. Every single one of Willow's dying words, "I love you," and "all of my property will be left to you," was heard clearly by George. Willow's mind went utterly blank. She felt she had lost the ability to think. George had seen everything. The camera angle shifted, and the surveillance footage moved to the hallway. Willow stared as George tried several times to get up but failed. When he finally managed to stand, a short-haired woman rushing down the stairs suddenly rammed into him, sending him violently tumbling down. Instinctively, Willow's mouth opened wide, wanting to scream, but her vocal cords trembled so violently that not a single sound came out. On the video, George rolled down the steps like an unstoppable ball, bouncing heavily from one stair to the next, until a pool of blinding red began to spread beneath him. And most importantly, before the woman pushed George down the staircase, she spoke a sentence. "You're the one who made Makoto suffer. Go to hell." Willow's pupils had already lost all focus. Chapter 15. After I landed in the United States, I was immediately admitted into the intensive care ward to properly recover. The doctor was very serious. "Mr. Wong, if you don't fully cooperate with the treatment, you may never be able to stand again." Thinking about my legs, numb and without sensation since that accident, my entire face turned ashen, like dead gray. "No, that won't happen." The handsome man's expression remained calm, his voice faint but steady. "I will follow the treatment carefully and strive to recover as soon as possible." During my time in the U.S., I actively underwent treatment. All of my physical indicators were gradually improving, but I felt that my heart, my mind, was gravely ill. In the stillness of midnight dreams, I always thought of my tumor, of my legs, of Willow, and of all those wretched, devastating memories. The gentle, devoted Willow who once loved me as if I were her life and the two-faced Willow who discarded me like trash overlapped again and again, only to split apart, becoming the nightmare that haunted me forever. I didn't know what was wrong with me anymore. The psychiatrist told me I was ill, suffering from severe depression and anxiety. When I received the diagnosis report, I sat in long silence. I will get better. No matter what happens, nothing will crush me again. And I meant every word. I poured nearly all my strength into cooperating with the doctors. At times, even they couldn't help but marvel. "Mr. Wong, your will to survive is the strongest we have ever seen. It's hard to imagine what kind of ordeal once drove you to such despair." I only gave a faint smile. That ordeal had been a nightmare long enough to destroy a lifetime. But so what? I had still walked out of it. There were still so many things worth seeing, worth doing, in life. To ruin myself over just one Willow, it simply wasn't worth it. After countless days and nights, the day of my discharge finally came. On a rare, bright, beautiful day. "Congratulations, Mr. Wong. You have fully recovered." The doctor walked alongside my parents as they accompanied me out of the hospital, praising me warmly. "To raise such an outstanding son, you must be extraordinary parents. We are all proud of Mr. Wong for his remarkable perseverance during this time." I lifted my head toward the blinding sunlight, feeling as if I had been reborn. I was no longer that man who collapsed because of a wife's cheating, nor the man who exhausted himself trying to please everyone. "Dad." I kept staring at the sun until tears welled up from the pain in my eyes. "Give me a few more years." My father looked confused. "Ah." Turning to him, I gave a bright, warm smile, just like I used to as a child. Gradually cut off our cooperation with the Liu family. At the mention of Willow, my father gritted his teeth in anger. "Of course, not only cut ties, we'll make every effort to trip them up at every step. What is Willow anyway, if it weren't for back then?" "Forget it." I hugged my father. "Give me just a few more years. I'll return home. I won't hide abroad forever like a coward. A few years from now will be the time I take back control of the Wong family and gradually consume the Liu family." My father had never imagined hearing such words. George. They had always doted on this son, because they had given him an unhealthy body and felt guilty for it. So when I once expressed that I had little interest in inheriting the Wong family, my father had already prepared himself. The future of the corporation would prioritize stability, and if his son never inherited, then professional managers would be entrusted to run the Wong family's affairs. That way, even after my parents passed, I would still have a sufficient trust fund to ensure a life of comfort without worry. But father never expected that the son he had raised with endless affection would one day say such words to him. Looking at my father's face, aged by the turbulence of these past days, my nose stung, and I could not stop the ache from rising in my chest. "I cannot spend my entire life sheltered under your wings." In the past, I was too weak. From now on, never again. Taking a deep breath, I made a solemn, grand promise. From now on, it will be my turn to protect you. Chapter 16. When Makoto was grabbed by the throat at the side of the hospital bed, he didn't even have time to realize what was happening. Willow. Looking at Willow's fierce, vicious gaze, so full of fury like never before, Makoto felt completely swallowed by an overwhelming shadow. A deep unease gnawed at his heart, as if something catastrophic had just happened. It was you, wasn't it? Willow's voice no longer carried even a trace of the tenderness he once had in their moments of intimacy. All that was left in his eyes was raw, genuine hatred. Makoto, I'm asking you, everything. It was you, wasn't it? In an instant, countless possibilities flashed through Makoto's mind. Willow, which one is he talking about? Willow let out a cold, mocking laugh. What's wrong? Thinking about which secret to confess to me first? Makoto's eyes brimmed with fear, turning red. Willow, listen to me. I didn't mean to go see George. I just. Willow sneered. So you do remember that I forbade you from seeing George? Makoto, I warned you again and again not to mess with George. You had just promised me you wouldn't. Yet right after that you went to meet him. You left him badly injured, lied to me, and tricked me into abandoning George when he needed help most. Tears rolled down Makoto's face, one after another. George is dead. You did it, didn't you? Willow's words struck Makoto like a thunderbolt from a clear sky, shattering him into pieces. How could Willow know? Makoto instinctively shook his head frantically. No, it wasn't me. Did Maria say something to you? She's a liar. She cheated me out of money. I didn't do anything. Willow, you have to believe me. I really was tricked. Willow's eyes grew darker as he watched Makoto's face turn red from suffocation, then suddenly shoved him away. Makoto fell heavily to the ground, coughing violently. So you do know that woman? After a moment of silence, Willow's smile curved even colder. Makoto's heart dropped with a sickening thud. Did it feel good sneaking around with another woman? Willow's gaze was icy as it fell upon the men overflowing with lies. Maria is your mistress. 2 years ago, she was locked up for fraud. So you were so desperate you came crawling to me. Was it because you wanted to kick her aside? After Maria got out of prison, I had already been picked up by you and brought into your home. So you pretended to be husband and wife with me, while sneaking around with her at the same time. What is it? Makoto, do you think I'm just some cheap, worthless person? You really are clever, aren't you? You made Maria willingly wear the cheating label, even pushed her to shove George down the stairs. A man like you, hungry to climb higher, really would stoop to anything. Makoto, Willow's eyes grew darker as a sharp smile spread across his face. The child in Maria's belly, whose is it? Hearing his past, those things he desperately wished Willow would never uncover, the secrets he had fought so hard to bury, laid bare so mercilessly. Makoto froze in shock. He could do nothing but weep. Under Willow's piercing, knife-like gaze, Makoto curled up in fear, muttering unconsciously, Willow, I truly love you. I only love you. Willow, please believe me. All of that was fake. You're the only one in my heart. Maybe even he felt how weak and hollow his own excuses sounded. By the end, Makoto couldn't go on, breaking down into sobs and choked whimpers. Willow laughed out loud. How laughable. This crying man before him, so pitiful, so ugly, so utterly disgusting. And yet, she had been played in circles by someone so worthless. She had let him destroy the marriage and family that should have been perfect and envied by all. She had let him order her into harming the men she loved most in her life. She had let him run rampant, pressing her again and again, trampling over every last bottom line. She had let him personally murder the men she loved most, leaving George to die forever. Willow laughed at himself, the sound hoarse and raw, like a bleeding dove crying in despair. You say I'm the only one in your heart? Makoto, that's pure fucking bullshit. The only thing in your heart is money. You came to me, deceived me, hid things from me, all of it was just for my fucking money. Chapter 17. I'll send Makoto back to the mountains. Willow said coldly to Sandra, didn't Makoto always dream of leaving that barren place? I respect everyone who tries to change their destiny through hard work, but he should never have stepped over George's blood and flesh to climb upward. So I'll send Makoto back to the place he should have stayed, let him watch everything there, and repent for his sins in hopeless despair. Sandra was already overwhelmed, her mind in chaos. Then George. At the thought of George, tears threatened to fall from Willow's eyes. In George's most helpless, most desperate moment, she had still chosen another man, one who had hurt George so deeply. She said with her mouth that George was the one she loved most, but each time, she ended up becoming the executioner's accomplice. For George, she was an eternal sinner. George is dead. Willow's voice was heavy with exhaustion. No matter what I do, I can't find him anymore. I'll never see him again in this life. By the end, Willow's voice was already choked with sobs. I miss George so much. When Makoto was forced into the car that would take him back to the mountains, He was still screaming Willow's name at the top of his lungs. "You can't do this to me, Willow. You can't be this cruel to me." But Willow didn't even show his face. Makoto's arms were twisted up, his legs kicking wildly in the air until one of the bodyguards slapped him hard across the face to shut him up. "You dare hit me. If Willow finds out what you've done to me, you're finished. If anything happens to me, can you afford the consequences?" Makoto's eyes were bloodshot, and on his face bloomed a glaring red handprint. Rage filled him. He wanted to tear apart the burly men who had just slapped him, but the bodyguard didn't hesitate to slap him again, leaving 2 symmetrical handprints across his cheeks. The sight was ridiculous, almost comical. With a derisive snort, the bodyguard tossed him into the car, ignoring Makoto's frantic hands clawing at the car door. He slammed it shut with a bang, crushing Makoto's fingers and drawing a scream. "Save your breath. Everyone knows you're nothing but trash who scammed Miss Lu, acting high and mighty in front of me. Pathetic. Mr. Wong, Miss Lu's real husband, vanished because of you, and you still dare strut around. Disgusting." The bodyguard clapped his hands and gave the order. "Send him to the place. Nothing must go wrong on the way. If there's any mistake, you'll answer to Miss Lu with your heads." Once the convoy drove far off, the bodyguard adjusted the miniature camera clip to his jacket, transmitting the footage to the Wong family. "Mr. Wong, everything you instructed is done. He's been sent back to where he belongs. Good work." The father then forwarded the video to me. "Disgusting. I was in class in America when I glanced at the video briefly, then immediately closed it. Dad, don't send me any more news about Makoto. He's nothing but scum. Willow is the real culprit behind everything. Some debts, sooner or later, I'll settle with him." I lowered my head, staring at the textbook covered in notes, whispering softly to myself. Chapter 18. Willow never truly believed that George was dead. She searched for him for 3 whole years, but it was all in vain. No matter how many resources and people Willow mobilized, she could not find the slightest trace of George. She had gone to the Wong family, cried and begged, but Father Wong only shut her out coldly, utterly unmoved. "How many times must I repeat myself? George is dead, driven to death by you and your lover. The harm you did to George cannot be undone with a simple 'I'm sorry.' Willow, if you truly feel guilty toward George, then let your nights be sleepless. Let your conscience torment you. Repent for your sins. Do not show yourself before us again. No one in the Wong family ever wants to see you. Security, show her out." Yet Willow did not give up. She simply chose another path, one that no one could have expected. Willow began using charity work to try to cleanse her sins and guilt. She established the George Foundation, dedicated to helping poor children in mountain regions receive an education, because George had always been kind-hearted. Back then, the charity event in the mountain village where Willow had lost her memory was actually founded because George had seen an online post that troubled him for nights, prompting him to invest in creating the foundation. Within just a year, the George Foundation grew like a snowball. Beyond supporting children's schooling, it expanded into healthcare, insurance, and public infrastructure. At one press conference, a reporter asked the question on everyone's mind. "Miss Lu, why did you name the foundation George?" Willow gave a bitter smile. "For the lover who left because of my mistakes." Her face before the camera was beautiful yet full of emotion. "I will spend my whole life atoning for my sins, hoping to earn his forgiveness and bring him back to me. I do not believe he is dead. My heart tells me he's still alive." Busybody reporters quickly dug up Willow's past marital history, reviving the once famous story of Willow and George's golden boy and girl marriage in the public eye. For a time, talk of Willow's powerful female lead image was everywhere. Even the Lu family's stock prices soared. Everyone speculated whether George was truly alive, why he had left, and they longed for a fairy tale reunion, for the prince and princess to be together once again in real life. Father Wong angrily slammed the video report shut. "That woman surnamed Lu is utterly shameless. This is nothing but moral blackmail against George. She's dressing up and beautifying the harm she inflicted on him. How can she be this despicable?" Out of protection for George, the Wong family never revealed the true reason behind their divorce. Willow might not bear the brunt of gossip, but as the victim, George would certainly be attacked. The notion of blaming the victim was nothing new in public opinion. No matter what, father could not bear to let his son be thrown into that cruel whirlpool of judgment. Yet this very morality and protection had instead become Willow's excuse to twist black and white, to morally blackmail others. Mother sat quietly to the side, pouring a glass of water for father. "George will be back soon. Let George handle these things himself. The man he is now is completely different from who he was 3 years ago. Reborn. Transformed. George will not disappoint us. He will resolve everything perfectly. And besides, when George left, he said that everything Willow owed him, he would take back sooner or later." The next day, as a massive Boeing airplane slowly came to a halt on the private runway, a man wearing oversized sunglasses descended the steps. It had been 3 years since he last returned. The strong wind blew my short hair wildly around my face. My gaze was colder and prouder than ever before. Willow, I hope you're ready to face everything. Chapter 19. On the second day after I returned to the country, I officially took charge of the Wang Group. At the grand board meeting, Father announced that I would become the sole heir of the Wang family. Amidst the uproar, I laid out a plan that could only be described as flawless. This is the Wang Group's 5-year development plan. My Adam's apple shifted slightly as I swept a cold gaze over the board members, each harboring their own agenda. If any of you can come up with something better, then I'll walk out this very moment and never again involve myself in the affairs of the Wang Group. After flipping through the proposal, the shareholders all fell into silence. Nothing to say. If there's nothing to say, then I'll take this seat. Without hesitation, I sat down in the chair closest to Father, my heart surging with immense joy and excitement. Love, romance. I thought to myself with exhilaration. Power and wealth, those are the things a man should devote his life to seizing. My second major move after returning to the group was to launch a full-force strike against the Lu Corporation. Over the years, under Father's careful leadership, the Wang Group had hidden its strength and built a solid foundation. Combined with my unpredictable tactics, this quickly threw Lu Corporation's stock into turmoil. Willow no longer had the capacity to manage the George Foundation. She was already overwhelmed, scorched by the Wang family's relentless assault. This isn't the old President Wang's style, Willow's analyst said with concern. We've never seen moves like this before. But from the tangled reports and numbers, Willow spotted a trace of something familiar. Her heart suddenly trembled. It was George. George had returned. It had to be him. Without caring about Lu Corporation's plunging stock, Willow dialed the number that had been unreachable since the accident 3 years ago, her hand trembling. To her shock, this time someone answered. Willow. The man's voice on the other end was both familiar and strange, carrying a vibrant energy Willow had never heard from him before. George. George. I knew you weren't dead. You're not dead. You really aren't dead. Willow's excitement left her incoherent. I've been looking for you. I missed you so much. I know, I said softly. I also saw all the reports about the George Foundation you created. Willow was on the verge of tears from the surge of emotions. George, can we meet, please? I miss you so much. I know I was wrong. I truly know I was wrong. I already sent Makoto away to where he belongs. And the woman who pushed you down the stairs, I've had her thrown in prison to face the punishment she deserved. I've done everything I can to make amends. Please forgive me. Just give me one more chance. I promise I'll spend the rest of my life making it up to you. Let's start over. Come back to me. George, I'm begging you. But my voice was calmer than ever before. Today at 6 in the evening. TP Hotel. First floor banquet hall. Let's talk. With that, I hung up without hesitation. Willow practically sprang off the sofa in the president's office, shouting for her secretary to come in. Call the stylist immediately. Bring me all the dresses from my usual brands. Hurry. As fast as possible. Staring into the full-length mirror, Willow trembled with excitement. 3 years. George had indeed not died, just as she had believed. And it wasn't even the worst scenario she had feared. George was even willing to see her again. Overjoyed, Willow carefully chose the styles and designs George had always liked best. With her whole heart, she looked forward to their meeting that evening. Chapter 20. Before getting out of the car, Willow nervously adjusted her necklace in the rearview mirror. How do I look? Her secretary glanced at the grand, imposing TP Hotel, suppressing a strange unease in her chest, and said with a smile, Miss Lu, you look exceptionally beautiful today. Surely Mr. Wang will be very happy to see you. Willow was quite satisfied with the way her secretary addressed George. Your bonus will be doubled this month. Brimming with confidence, Willow stepped out of the Maybach, carrying in her arms a huge bouquet of lilies, George's favorite flower. But the moment she pushed open the doors to the banquet hall, Willow froze in place. The hall was filled with reporters, cameras and flashes all instantly turning toward her as she entered. On the stage stood George, so unfamiliar to Willow now, no longer weak, but dressed in a sharp suit, commanding and powerful. You came. I smiled faintly. Since the main guest has arrived, let's all take a look together at the truth behind my divorce with Willow. At once, Willow instinctively cried out, No, George, don't. But 2 tall bodyguards from the Wang Group immediately restrained her, covering her mouth to prevent her from disrupting the press conference. I unraveled the timeline piece by piece, those memories that once hurt me so badly I nearly wanted to leave this world. From Willow's disappearance and amnesia, to her regaining memory and returning home, to her pregnancy, the child not mine, her request for a fake divorce to appease Makoto, and finally, to Willow exhausting every effort to save Makoto, while I suffered a tumor injury, lost my legs, and departed for America in despair. The evidence I had once organized and sent to Willow, which she had seen with her own eyes, was now displayed one by one on the massive high-definition screen. I tore away the scabs with my own hands, laying bare the bloody, raw truth before everyone. All the reporters were stunned. This Miss Lu, who had always enjoyed such a sterling reputation in public, had secretly committed so many disgusting deeds. You've always been curious why I divorced Willow, haven't you? It was I who broke the silence, my voice calm yet tinged with a faint smile as I spoke into the microphone. This is the reason I divorced her, because she betrayed our family, because she chose the men who destroyed us. Because of her, I nearly lost my life, and came close to never standing again for the rest of my days. Pinned down by the bodyguards, Willow struggled desperately, her face a mess of tears and snot. She looked at me pleadingly, begging me to stop, begging me not to go on. Willow, are you in pain? I said coolly, but when you were cheating, when you went to him again and again, when I nearly lost my legs, my pain was a million times worse than what you feel now. This is what I want you to return to me. Don't worry, there will be more things you can return to me in the future. I dropped the microphone and strode away. That press conference was like a deep-water torpedo dropped into the heart of the capital. The public image Willow had built for years collapsed overnight, and the entire Lu Corporation fell into chaos. I led the Wang Group to seize the opportunity and strike hard, making Lu Corporation's already dire situation even worse. But Willow no longer had the energy to care about the company's collapse. After the press conference, she locked herself in her room and refused food and water for 3 whole days. Sandra, crying and pounding at the door in desperation, finally had no choice but to hire a professional team to forcibly dismantle Willow's bedroom door and drag her out. Willow, are you insane? How can you destroy yourself like this? Sandra sobbed as she scolded her, stroking Willow's face that had grown gaunt and skeletal in just 3 short days, her heart aching unbearably. But Willow looked like her soul had been drained away, sitting in a daze, muttering unconsciously to herself. He hates me, Willow whispered. George hates me. Suddenly she burst into wild laughter. George hates me. He hates me. He still loves me. He must still love me. He hates me. He loves me. He hates me. He loves me. Sandra's face twisted with terror. Willow, what's happening to you? Willow, don't scare your mother. Willow kept laughing like a madwoman for a long time until, too weak to go on, she collapsed to the floor. From that fall, she never stood up again. She became a lunatic, every day repeating only those 2 short sentences. He hates me. He loves me. Without Willow, the Lu Corporation had no chance of revival. The collapsing empire drew predators from all sides, each eager to grab a piece. The Wang Group was especially ruthless, determined to strip Lu Corporation of its bones and devour it whole. To Father Wang's surprise, public opinion overwhelmingly sided with me. Almost all the voices were supportive, praising me. As I watched the Wang Group's stock price surge to new heights, my mood had never been better. I would never again shy away from the painful path I once walked. I solemnly signed my name on the stock transfer agreement. From this day on, the future stretched bright and dazzling before me, full of prosperity and promise. No matter how difficult the road ahead may be, compared to what I endured before, nothing would ever feel truly difficult again.